Man, I'll tell you what. If you want to get everybody upset in your enterprise, let the wireless go down. That's why we want to be able to troubleshoot wireless. So find out more right here on IT Pro TV.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
There is no doubt what I said is absolutely 100% true. The other one, of course, is let a printer go down and see what happens, right, Anthony?
That's right.
So it is right here. We're going to talk about troubleshooting wireless, and we have Mr. Troubleshooter himself, Anthony. And Anthony, you excel at the idea of troubleshooting here. So when we start talking about, especially with wireless, this is one of those that absolutely every single Cisco professional needs to at least be able to have a handle on.
And, it is a new kind of area for us. I'm challenged with it all the time. I was sharing with you, I got challenged with it personally with the new MacBook Pro. That was just absolutely, the wireless was going bye-bye. And I didn't even think of a key troubleshooting step. I immediately was thinking like hardware on the MacBook Pro. Never thought to try a different wireless infrastructure. And so sure enough, brought my home system into the enterprise here at IT Pro TV, no drops. And that tells me that this hardware is fine. So now I need to go back to that wireless infrastructure I was in and see what is breaking down as far as this Mac goes and that wireless. And I'm very, and don't do this when you're troubleshooting, right? Never fixate on, I've solved it, without really getting in there and doing your investigation. But clearly it does look like I have an interference issue in that infrastructure. So I'll start looking at that more closely. But let's break this down as Cisco wants us to for Encore. And the very first thing that we want to be thinking about is what has to go right.
Right.
So what needs to happen and needs to happen flawlessly, or we could have issues. The first thing that needs to happen, and this is what we always tend to think of first, is are we within RF range? And that got me going on my problem of the drops, because I'm like, hey, Apple, the unit's right behind me. Like, I'm getting radiation sickness from that thing. I'm so close to it. So that you rule out right away. The AP association, when we're in the enterprise environment, we know we looked at in an earlier episode the many steps that are involved with that AP speaking the language of love, which is the CAP/WAP and the DTLS and all that's got to go smoothly with the wireless LAN controller. So that's another key point. And then once those first two pieces of magic happen properly, then the client gets its IP address and starts happily communicating on the wireless network. So I wanted to start with this kind of common sense but important breakdown of what needs to go right. Now, let's talk about what we see in the wireless LAN controller now. Okay, we're in the graphical user interface of that wireless LAN controller, and we start troubleshooting client status. Cisco does a great job of showing us at a glance in the WLC the client status, and it will be start. Okay, the client is in RF range. Association, authentication, DHCP, and then online. So notice this is a super simplified state look, if you will, at all those many different states that could possibly be going on. They just decided to give us a visual indicator right away of where that client currently is in the process. And it's great because if you get stuck at the authentication piece, now you know you don't need to troubleshoot the RF signal to that client. You know you don't need to troubleshoot association issues. It's stuck at authentication. And it's funny that I brought up that example because that is a very common situation that can happen where your ICE isn't communicating properly if that's involved, or the wireless LAN controller isn't set up properly to authenticate that client.
Yeah, now as I start thinking about that, I was thinking about a situation that happened with one that I had set up a long time ago, which is DHCP.
Sure.
So I had set it up for a small company, and we just didn't realize after a while it started dropping people, started losing connections, and we troubleshooted everything else. Like, hey, what's left? Finally, we actually realized something. We had to go to the DHCP server, and we found out something. We had so many more connections that were going on that we ran out of IP addresses to hand out.
Absolutely.
So you have to keep track of these things. At least be able to examine and go, is the DHCP pool large enough? Do we actually have that? Because if not, you'll run into that same issue that we did. Finally, all we had to do was increase the DHCP pool, and everything actually started working just great.
Yeah, think about the enterprise environment that isn't properly secured.
Yes.
So now you're getting rogue access points introduced, and that's another DHCP related potential thing. We can't forget that from a security perspective, one of the easiest things to do is denial of service. So from a security perspective, when we wrap that into the troubleshooting, we realize there really could be depletion of resources like DHCP pools that's pretty easy for the security attacker to pull off. They're just like, oh, I'll just denial of service the thing. I'll just consume all of that pool, and that's going to cause a problem.
And it's a problem for us because we set it up one time and you kind of forget it because you go, all right, we're done. And then it starts happening and your mind doesn't automatically say,
Yep.
I set it up incorrectly or I need to add in more. So got to be careful of that.
Yep. In the right here, you can see I did some all caps. And that was just to demonstrate to you that on your client main troubleshooting page of the WLC, and by the way, I would show that, but you won't be able to see it really well in that interface. But there's two areas for a client that you can, you click on the client device, obviously, and there's this page of a ton of, tiny text that's the details of that client. There are two areas, Ronnie, that are so cool that Cisco really highlights for us. And one is performance, and the other is a very simple connection score.
All right.
I love it, from 0 to 100. And so at a glance, you can see that, as far as like noise goes and all that kind of stuff for the client and just the overall RSSI, it does some sophisticated algorithm to just give this nice percentage score. And, you could see, 18%. That could be factoring into the issues that we're seeing. Or you see a connection score of 90% and you're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. That's way above baseline. And now you can factor out issues like noise and stuff like that right away. So they really thought it through with the tools inside of the wireless LAN controller. And speaking of that, there is 4 tests that you can perform from your wireless LAN controller for different troubleshooting scenarios. And I love the first one. They automate for us the old standard, the ping test. There's just nothing like it, right? So sure enough, it starts right there. Nice automated tool for you to be able to ping. The next one takes it a step up and is very much like a debug, Ronnie. What they'll do is they'll run a connection test against the client, and they'll show you debug output, basically, of every step of that process. The next testing tool they have is one step up from that, and it builds and displays for you a full-blown event log regarding that whole connection process. And then your last troubleshooting tool, and hopefully you never have to get this far, but you do a full-blown packet capture of everything that is occurring so you can dig inside those packets and try and determine at a very low level what is going wrong. So the last thing that we have to talk about is the AP. So this just really breaks down into 2 troubleshooting areas, and you would be using a lot of your traditional troubleshooting tools here. For instance, the number 1, remember your lightweight AP needs to connect to your infrastructure, and that is typically done with a layer 2 access port. So you might need to troubleshoot that, and don't forget the tried and true troubleshooting tools you would have on the switch side for that. And then of course you have AP, access point testing, that you could do through your wireless LAN controller. Just don't forget to test that piece. It reminds me, Ronnie, of the old, is it plugged in?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you don't overlook simple things like, wow, the AP lost its ability to connect to our network. That very well could be the problem. And then what I think most engineers tend to jump to, overlooking that first point, they might jump right to, oh, it's got to be the AP not being able to connect to the wireless LAN controller. They jump to that because that connectivity must be in place or things aren't going to work, with one major exception. What is that exception? We covered it in an earlier episode. I gave you a big hint, and that is, don't forget about Flex Connect. In a Flex Connect environment, remember what we said in an earlier episode, that has this remarkable ability to not use the CAPWAP approach anymore. So the access point in a Flex Connect environment has the ability to go old school, if you will, and not do the CAPWAP connectivity. And that's in the case where that branch office WAN connection can't support it for whatever reason. So that would be the one exception, making troubleshooting in the Flex Connect environment a little trickier, because you have to figure out, okay, what kind of status is my AP in with my wireless LAN controller in the Flex Connect environment. But clearly that is unique to Flex Connect. So if you're not using Flex Connect in your enterprise anywhere, well then break down the troubleshooting of AP issues into the 2 phases that I'm talking about here. Let's make sure we have the connectivity to the regular old infrastructure, and then let's make sure we have the CAPWAP connectivity between the AP and the wireless LAN controller.
All right, Anthony, that was a lot of different troubleshooting steps that we should be familiar with. Go back through this, take a look at the list, as well as some of the details that you may have to put in to give you the story or the scenario that you need to, so that you can answer some of these different questions. But it is going to help you as you continue on in the enterprise, especially in the realm of wireless.
And Ronnie, the specializations,
right?
I haven't looked through all of them yet, but I betcha there's several. I know of at least one that's dedicated to wireless, right?
Yeah.
So if you are like, wow, you've whet my appetite here, and wireless is one of my key responsibilities, you will want to look to those wireless specializations.
Yeah, you'll definitely get a lot more in depth there, as well as understand all the ways that those things actually connect together. All right, well, that's a great place for us to end this episode then. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm your host, Ronnie Wong.
And I'm Anthony Sequeira.
Stay tuned right here for more of your CCNP Encore show.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.